today's screencast will start with the title, The New Frontier, which is going to kind of talk about Kennedy's domestic policies. So the New Frontier was his kind of plan in terms of laws and budgets passed within the United States to improve the American economy and the situation of the American people. He wanted to provide medical care for the elderly. He wanted to address poverty in the really poor urban cities in America. He also wanted to help with education. But his New Frontier agenda, for the most part, will not get passed. Basically, he just didn't, popularize it enough to get a lot of support from the constituents around the country, which is that's the American people. So his plans really won't win in the most part. But he is able to get a few things passed successfully. Sorry, here we go. He did want to stimulate the economy, and to do so, he needed to put money into the economy, creating jobs, creating different agencies. That's going to, though, cause deficit spending, just like what FDR did during the New Deal era, spending more than the U.S. had in money. And the other thing he was able to successfully do is he raised the minimum wage to $1.25 an hour. So as many of you are minimum wage employees, just kind of consider what it used to be back in the day. One other successful thing that Kennedy was able to do is he created the Peace Corps. And probably many of you have heard of the Peace Corps. It was an organization of volunteer assistance, a program of volunteer assistance where volunteers were sent to developing nations within Asia, Africa, and Latin America. It was very successful. You had many high numbers of volunteers joining the Peace Corps, often in between schooling, so maybe after you graduated high school but before you went to college. And as part of the Peace Corps, you could work within healthcare, you could be a teacher, you could work with agriculture and be an agricultural advisor. You just basically would provide whatever services were needed in a certain region, which things obviously like healthcare, agricultural development, education, all of those things were key issues that needed to be addressed. And so the Peace Corps was just an avenue for people to be able to benefit the world in that way. So this is very much like a global program, but it was created as part of Kennedy's administration. In terms of the space race kind of continuing, we do see, and you see him pictured on the left, that Yuri Gagarin was able to successfully become the first man to orbit or to go into outer space. He's the first human in outer space. And he is a Soviet, so of course, the U.S. and Kennedy as leader of the U.S. at the time is going to kind of view this as a challenge to the United States that they were not able to send the first human into space. So they vow during Kennedy's administration to be able to send the first man to the moon. Keep in mind that Kennedy will actually not be president any longer by the time this is successful for the United States, but it was a mission began, my grammar's awful, under Kennedy's administration. He's the one to vow to do this successfully. It happened in 1969, and the U.S. was able to land the first man on the moon, who is Neil Armstrong. As pictured on the screen, he is most famous for his statement, "One small step for man and one giant leap for mankind." Unfortunately, tragedy will strike Dallas. Basically, most people know a little bit of background about the Kennedy assassination. We'll kind of get into a political background first, why is he even in Texas at the time of his assassination. The year is 63, big election, going to come up in 64, because it's the final year of his term. So in the fall of 63, the polls are kind of showing that he was losing popularity in the South because of his stance on civil rights. We'll talk about his role in civil rights in the next unit quite in depth and detailed. But for now, just note that Kennedy was an avid supporter of civil rights, and while being a Democrat, he is popular in the South. That makes him kind of unpopular. So we need to find a way to kind of generate Southern Democratic support as he heads into this new re-election year. So he and his wife arrived in Dallas, Texas on November 22nd, 1963, and they were going to meet with the Democratic Party of Texas to kind of work out some differences. And upon their arrival, they basically kind of organized this drive-through of the streets of Dallas where they were going to, have a chance to greet the crowd, greet his constituents, wave, and they were riding like in an open limousine, okay? So he is completely exposed. And as the car approaches a certain building and takes a turn, rifle shots ring out, and he is shot in the head. His car did, rush to a nearby hospital, but it was just too late. Like, they were unable to revive him. Because of that, and I'll get to these pictures in a second, but I want to show this picture really quickly. When the president can no longer serve, the vice president is immediately sworn into office, and this would be Johnson, Lyndon B Johnson. He was actually sworn in office on Air Force One. You see his wife, most commonly referred to as Lady Bird Johnson, on the left, and you see Kennedy's wife, Jacqueline, on the right, looking very, very solemn as she's still in her attire from the day in which her husband was assassinated, right next to her, which is very, very sad. The nation is just completely shocked. Like, why did this happen? Who would do this? And police will eventually charge one Mr. Lee Harvey Oswald with the murder. His palm print was found on the weapon used to kill Kennedy, okay? He is pictured on the screen on the left. His name is Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, once it becomes public who had done it, once Oswald's arrested, he was being transferred between jails, and this is all publicized on the news. And on live television, the man on the right, Jack Ruby, emerges from the crowd where Oswald's being transferred and shoots and kills Lee Harvey Oswald. And that's just a very bizarre, chain of events that many people are starting to suspect that Oswald's part of like a potential conspiracy that we'll talk about in our activity we're going to complete. But the government established the Warren Commission to officially investigate what happened here, what were the motives, who is truly responsible for Kennedy's death. And the Warren Commission did conclude that Oswald himself solely was acting on his own accord and did shoot and kill President Kennedy. But then later on, there's other investigations that assume he's part of a conspiracy. But bottom line is, the history textbooks identify Lee Harvey Oswald as being the murderer. Okay, and we will talk about some more conspiracy theories in our activity. Please pause your notes for now, and we'll conclude with our notes on Johnson in class on Friday. I hope you all have a great day.